Hey, you guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. This week, I am joined by special guest Joe Van Diemen, who is the CEO of USA Brands. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's really kind of becoming very near and dear to my heart, something that is a really growing interest to me, and that is the kind of state of fiber production here in the United States and what's going on with that. You guys may have heard us talk about Vermont flannel before, and that is one of the USA brands here. Joe, give us an introduction to the different brands and what it is that you guys do over at USA Brands.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Carolyn. At USA Brands, what we're doing is we're taking some really great, authentic American, USA-made apparel and soft goods brands and making sure that they're going to be around for generations to come. So we found that there's a number of these small companies that were started more as a mom and pop shop, and we found that they need that next transition into a next generation. So we brought them together to form a larger organization called USA Brands, where we can provide the marketing, the technology expertise, some of those things that a small mom and pop shop may not be able to have. So currently under our umbrella today, we have the Vermont Flannel Company, as you mentioned. We have two denim blue jean brands, one called All American Clothing and one called Gusset Brand. And then most recently, we've added the Vermont Teddy Bear Company in there. And I know that's a little different. It's not apparel, but making teddy bears here in the USA is actually very similar to making clothing. We still use sewing machines. We still have a very similar line manufacturing process for that. So we thought it was a great fit. But all of these brands have been around for 20 or more years. And we just said they have a great product line, a great customer base. But oftentimes we found it's in either a geographic niche or within a small niche of customers. And we said, you know what, we have the expertise to really take that and drive it to be a nationwide brand.
Mm. Yeah, that's so exciting. So you're really actually touching on a couple of different things that are like really make my heart happy here. One is USA made and really strengthening fiber, the kind of fiber production and clothing production here in the United States, but also kind of revitalizing the small family business and helping small family businesses to kind of grow and get to that next level and to stick around and not get swallowed up by the giants of the corporate world that are just, all about the bottom dollar there. And so that's really exciting. I'm really excited. How did you get started doing what you're doing? I'd love to hear the story behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. My background's a little varied and a little bit of a strange path to get there. But I started my career working at Google. And at Google, I had the opportunity to work in 10 different countries. And I worked with small businesses all around the world to really help them leverage the internet and technology to grow their business. So I found that I had a passion for working with small businesses. And once I left Google, I decided I wanted to be in small business myself. I looked at a number of opportunities to either start my own small business or acquire a business. And as part of that process, I ran across a small blue jean manufacturer for sale out of Ohio, and it's called All American Clothing. Fell in love with the brand and really fell in love with the customers there. Those blue jeans are made, soup to nuts here in the U.S. from the denim being milled in Georgia, pocketing, zippers, things like that, all coming from different places in the U.S. and then really sold to a great American customer. Our customer for that brand is really someone who likes, it's a hardworking American, right? We sell to a lot of electricians, a lot of plumbers, construction workers, people that really make our economy and our community grow. And I just fell in love with that. So it was a great time and thought it was something that I could really sink my teeth into and help that business grow. So that's how I got started by accidentally, finding a blue jean company that needed some new ownership and really felt like my skills more on the technology and marketing side could help grow that business.
Oh, absolutely. That's really cool. Sometimes our paths are kind of directed a lot more by those chance meetings, or what feels like chance meetings, at least, than we realize until we're looking back years later and we're like, wow, that one little thing like changed the whole trajectory of my life. It's so fascinating. it's interesting. Long before I met you and have gotten to talk with you or visit with you, Josh has been wearing All American jeans for years now. And, just in our move to trying to buy more USA made, that's been the brand that he really landed on and has loved. And here I'm wearing a Vermont flannel shirt here. You haven't talked about that. But I find that I keep grabbing for this. Out of all the flannel shirts, which I have a very large collection, you might know, of flannel shirts. And this is the softest. It is so soft. Oh my goodness. I just, those days where I wake up and I'm like, it's a little chilly out and I feel like I want to still be in bed. This is the shirt that I reach for. So, the state of how I feel by whether or not I'm wearing this particular shirt. But it's so great. And then you guys just sent us a Vermont teddy bear, and the 18-month-old has not let that go. It is now officially his teddy bear. He sleeps with it all the time. It's so great. So super, super excited that you're doing what you're doing. I want to jump in a little bit more to the topic of the day and really talk about apparel manufacturing in the United States, because let's see, it was probably about 5 years ago that I watched the documentary called The True Cost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a hard one to watch. If you guys have not seen that, it's definitely something that is worth watching. It was very eye-opening to me. Probably not something you want to watch with little kids around necessarily, but it was very eye-opening to me how every time I was going to get, cheap, fast fashion, stop by the local Walmart and grab that tank top or that t-shirt that I never really thought much about, how much that was actually, contributing to essentially human slavery in other parts of the world, and how it was creating this system because I wasn't willing to pay any more for my shirts or for my clothing. And I wanted, an abundance of cheap clothing. It was actually setting up a system where moms on the other side of the world were essentially working themselves to death with their children right there. And it was very eye-opening for me and very convicting because, I'm like any American woman. I like my new clothing and my new things. And that really made me slow down and start thinking about it and thinking about, what about returning jobs to the United States where we can at least ensure working conditions. And in that way, we kind of are voting for the conditions that we want people around the world working in, but also the handling of the manufacturing supplies, like the dumping of the chemicals into the rivers and all of those things that are just making so many people sick around the globe, even if it's not happening right here. And this is just something, when we don't see it right here in front of us, it's easy to kind of excuse it and move it out of our minds. And seeing that it's happening all over the place around the world where they don't have the regulations that we have. And so these companies are just dumping chemicals and people are getting, whole communities are coming down with cancer within a couple of years and getting sick and dying. And it just was this moment of like, how can we bring this back a little bit closer to home? How can we gain a little more control over it? But how also can we turn it into something that's beneficial? So let's talk for a second about the current state of apparel making in the United States and apparel manufacturing in the United States. Are we doing very much of it here?
We're not doing very much of it here, Carolyn. I think it's sad to say it's not quite as sad as the show that you referenced, but here in the U.S. we only manufacture about 2% of the apparel that Americans wear. So down from probably 30 years ago or so, where almost all the manufacturing of clothing here in the U.S. was done domestically. There's been a huge drop off during that time, and now we're just doing a very small amount. As you referenced, a number of different reasons for that. One of those is the consumer really looking for a lot of choice, really looking for I need to have something new and have the lowest cost. But the other is there were some different rules and regulations and policies that allowed for a lot lot of offshore and outsourced production to happen, that really drove a lot of that labor to the cheapest labor pools, which as you referenced, it's definitely in those countries that have lower environmental standards, lower standards about employee safety, a variety of things that are really concerning on a human level.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad that, we're doing so little so close to home. And I think, if the world ever did break down, like a lot of us homesteaders are often, thinking like, what would happen if trade broke down? Well, right now, if trade broke down, we'd have an awfully hard time putting socks on or
Absolutely.
pants on or shirts on or just about anything else, and those are pretty like basic items.
Uh,
Um,
Absolutely. It's a scary state. I was just reading last month, there was an article that the US Navy, they are short on pants for their uniforms, right? And it's like,
okay.
well, that would be concerning, right? Where they have a delay of a few months now before they're expecting to have additional pants available. So new recruits are not getting the uniforms that they need, and servicemen are just not really being suited as appropriate for their job. And again, those are things that generally don't meet the headlines, but I would say are absolutely concerning. But one note, as you mentioned, when the world comes to a stop, as it did a few years ago during COVID, I thought one thing that came out of that was we saw a lot of production capacity open up here in the U.S. And you saw that real strong effort of people coming together and saying, we have extra sewing machines sitting here. We have old equipment. How are we going to do these things to make masks, to make gowns, and all those things? So, to me, while that was a catastrophic event by all measures, there was the American ingenuity and innovation that came out of that. That it was really promising to see that come back to more of that traditional industry that was utilized for manufacturing apparel. So that may not be happening as much again today, but it definitely was a bright spot a few years ago when we saw some of that come back to life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You're talking, and I'm thinking, I know a total of 3 people who actually started mask making businesses
Mm-hmm.
during COVID, and was like, well, I'm stuck at home anyways. I have a sewing machine. I already have an Etsy store or whatever they were doing. And they had cloth sitting around, so they were like, well, why not? And so people will meet the demand. What Okay, let's talk about why it's important. Like, why does it matter that we aren't manufacturing apparel in the United States? Why is it important, or why should it be important to consumers?
Yeah, I think for a few different reasons, Carolyn. And one is, as you referenced, we currently have a lot of reliance on other countries, specifically China and a few other countries that we don't really have great relationships with. And as you mentioned, overnight, we could be in a position where we just don't have socks anymore, right? Or those types of things could be much more of a reality than we would ever like to admit. While it's not necessarily a matter of national security, it is something that I would say, clothing is a commodity. It's something that you want, and similar to the food that we grow throughout the country, we would want to be able to manufacture our own clothing, our own soft goods as we need to, and especially if you're in a time where there is a war on the horizon or something like that, you're going to need that type of equipment and that type of capability. I think the challenges that we have are we've let that go for so long that it's going to be hard to really spin up any of that capacity overnight that there used to be. So I think one, just to make sure we have the supply is a good reason. And then two, the other pieces of that are that they are good jobs that are going to be around for a long time and obviously help support your local tax base. You look at the communities that really were big into textile production, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And a lot of those are small communities that may only have 500 to 2,000 people, but they were the lifeblood of those communities and something that's really important. And a lot of those communities have never really come back from that, and we've seen them really trail off. So I think if you're looking towards more rural America, those places that used to be really, really great, quaint small towns, we've lost a lot of that. And, I'd say a decent portion of that is due to apparel manufacturing not being in those communities any longer.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. And like you're saying, once it's been gone for so long, not only do you lose maybe the space, the factory space, lose the tooling. All of a sudden, from 50 years ago, now all of the equipment, I would imagine, is very outdated. I'm sure it's really come a long way since then. But you also lose a bit of that know-how and just the knowledge that comes behind all of that. And that can be a little bit hard to regain. You can't do that overnight. You can't regain that type of knowledge overnight.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's one thing, I talk to a lot of people that are in the apparel manufacturing business, and they say that time and time again. They say our workforce is, 60-year-olds plus, and, anyone who's young and interested in getting involved, it may take 6 months or a year to get them up to speed on a variety of different machines and things like that. So, another bright spot that I've seen in the industry, I've seen some really, interesting ideas in terms of how to get people up to speed faster. There's one location that I visited in northern Indiana that they have a cut and sew operation, and they have connected lasers to all of their sewing machines. Oh. And I was like, I've never seen a sewing machine that has 3 lasers on it. What is it here for, right? And the intent of that was to really help train someone or guide someone as a new user. And coming out of that place where saying, this person was taught to sew from a sewing machine at a very young age, and now they've updated up to a commercial level sewing machine. It's like now getting them to be a machine operator, understanding if you line up things in certain areas and you do this, they have the guidance to produce very quickly. So they're at the point that they're trying to get people off the street to being a productive employee at the location within hours instead of months or years, which is just a really fascinating thing to see.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So applying the technology to the training of the skill. Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think I could use a laser when I sew because, they always say, well, you just need to sew a straight line. Everything's just a straight line. And I'm like, well, maybe yours are straight lines, but I don't know about mine.
It's easier said than done for sure. They still don't let me anywhere near a sewing machine at my house.
We've gotten to work with quite a few brands now that are USA made. And for me, I noticed that in all of those brands, there seems to be just this huge quality difference from what I can buy that just comes imported from overseas. Is that just inherent? Does it have to do with just the pricing that we have to do in the United States that, it costs us more to produce it. So therefore we need to have that better quality to kind of offset the cost. Or is that just part of the production process? I've always been kind of curious about that question. Like, is there anything inherently better in made in the USA, or is it just that we're really seeing that quality is higher to offset the cost?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of different things. And going back to 30 or 40 years ago, you used to be able to go to a department store and get a nice quality suit for $100. And I think when you go to a department store today, you can go to that same department store and you're going to get a suit for $100. And then you think about it and say, wait a second, that just doesn't make sense anymore. How did we go through 3 or 4 decades and that price hasn't changed? Obviously, the cost of that labor went down, but a large piece of that was the materials as well. I think as you've seen this shift of more overseas manufacturing and more people interested in fast fashion, quick development, all those things, there's been significantly more reliance on I would say materials that probably just aren't as great as what materials we utilize. Traditionally, clothing was almost 100% cotton all the time. And a lot of the clothes that we produce here under our brands are still 100% cotton because we think those produce the best quality. They're going to be around for a long time because of that. And as you referenced, it creates really soft, wearable clothing. As we go towards more different types of active wear, you start getting a lot more blends that have plastics in them, polyesters and things like that. The nice thing is those are relatively inexpensive to produce. But the thing about that is they generally have poor quality. They don't hold up through the number of washes and things like that. So I think a couple of different things that you're looking at when you say this is USA made quality and can you feel the difference? The answer is yes, you're probably starting with higher quality materials from the beginning. Since our manufacturing costs are going to be higher, we're not going to use cheap materials from the start. We recognize that It's expensive to put together a shirt or a pair of blue jeans here, and someone who's willing to pay that extra for the labor, they're going to want the quality material that goes with that. So we are going to start with our 100% cottons, those things that may be a little bit more expensive than you would find coming from offshore manufacturing. And then secondly, I do think we have a lot, I guess we pay a lot more attention to quality just from a domestic standpoint. We're not doing things in such high volumes as oftentimes overseas manufacturing is done. And again, if we're going to say this is made in America, I think the one common thread that you see in working with a company that says made in America, they know that means it's quality, right? And we want to stand by it. We want to put our name on it, and we want you to tell your friends about it. So we're not going to let something go through our door, send it out in a package to you unless we really think that is a quality product. So I think it's twofold there. I think materials are definitely not what they used to be in terms of what a lot of production is, especially if you're shopping at a Walmart or other lower end type places. And then two, I think just from a company standpoint, most American-made companies are going to be very interested in making sure the quality is there, because there's nothing else to stand by other than your name, and make sure that you get a good quality, good customer experience in purchasing and wearing our products.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that is the offset, is that buying USA made is often more expensive. And yet, because of the better quality that we're experiencing with it, it means you get to buy a whole lot less of it. Yeah. So, those jeans of Josh's are lasting a really long time. And that means we're buying fewer jeans. So they cost a little bit more. They're actually not. I mean, you pay attention to jean costs nowadays, no matter where they're made, and jeans are expensive. So I don't find these exorbitant at all, but they are lasting longer, which just really ends up long-term putting a lot more money back in your savings account to be able to pay for all the other things that are getting more expensive in our world that we don't have options on, like food. In the long run, it pays off. In the short term, maybe it's a little bit hard to swallow. And it's one of these things, it's kind of like when you take your food supply and you go from buying 2 days worth of groceries at the grocery store and decide, hey, I'm going to start bulk buying my food. You have to swallow a little bit of a lump at the beginning, but then as you get going, getting momentum, you end up saving more and more money month after month. It's kind of the same thing with switching your purchasing to the United States. You made in the USA is just that same idea of like, sometimes that purchase cost is a little bit more upfront, but then that ends up adding up over time what you're saving, because you're not having to repurchase things over and over again. And when a brand is standing on its reputation, that becomes important, right? Like, you have to actually make sure your product is good quality. Whereas, we've all been on Amazon shopping for something, and you see the exact same shirt, the exact same models, the exact same picture over and over again in, maybe 10 different brand names. And you're like, there's not going to be a lot of accountability for quality here, is there? If it's, all coming from one factory somewhere, but branded all these different ways, and these brands pop up and go away almost overnight. And, it's a whole different ballgame. It really is a different animal. And it gives us a lot more power over what we're wearing as consumers when you're working with a company that's concerned about its reputation and wants to listen to the people who are buying the clothing.
Absolutely. You're spot on. I love your analogy of stocking up your pantry. I would say, it's very similar. I think I have a lot of people that say, well, one, I have people that say, Joe, you're the only person I know that sells clothing that tells me to buy less clothing. And I'm like, absolutely. I want you to buy less clothing. We're consuming way too much as a society. And then two, I think, just like changing your eating habits or anything else in your life, making that switch doesn't have to be done overnight, right? I mean, just think about it as you start to go through your closet, as you start to have additional needs. Think about buying American made and thinking about how that changes your habits in doing so. It's not something that you need to go in today, throw out everything that's not American made. But as you start updating your closet and having additional needs, start buying little by little. And as you said, most of your American made clothing is going to last for a long time. So it just gets, to be part of that rotation, and you get so many more wears out of each piece that are there. It's not something you have to do overnight. And there are a number of brands out there, including some of ours, that I think really try to be a good value. You mentioned that your husband wearing our blue jeans. We're selling our All American blue jeans starting at $65. That's not quite as cheap as you're going to find at Walmart, but the quality is going to be substantially better, and we're playing in the same arena as a Carhartt or a Dickies, or someone who's going to charge a little bit more. So we're not talking a substantial increase in price from that. So it is something that I think if you look, you'll find that there are some competitive prices out there. And then the second half of that is like, just take a good look at what it is that you're wearing and if you really need that. There's a stat that came out a year or two ago that says the average American threw away 86 pounds of clothing this year, right?
Oh,
And it's just unbelievable, right? It's hard to believe that the average American has 86 pounds of clothing in their closet. But it's like, do you really need that much? Why would you ever need to consume at that level that you're going through that much clothing? So as you touched on, I think if you have, a few quality American-made pieces, it's a really great base to start from. You can grow from there. You can add as you need to, but hopefully that's going to cut back on your overall purchasing. You're going to say, I have some versatile pieces that I can wear, and I'm not going to have to buy as much. And even though it costs a little bit more, there's going to be some savings for you in the long run.
yeah, that's great. It's a hard concept for us. I think as Americans, we are very thrift driven, which is kind of funny because I think we're thrift driven so we can spend our money in other places, like the places where it's optional. And we feel like we can add a little luxury to our lives or a little entertainment or something. But it is hard because it feels like we really want to be good stewards of our money. And in some ways that's been pounded into us that cheaper is better in that. But we really have to step back and just say, cheaper's not good if it's not good. Like, right. It's pretty much that simple. It's just not good. And we have to switch that mentality a little bit that says fewer, better made, and better for the environment, better for the people, better for our economy, better for everything is a lot better than more that we just don't need. And honestly, if we're throwing it away, we don't really even want it. We don't know what to do with it. It's just too much for us. So, okay, I have a question for you here. And I partly want to like plug my ears and like squint my eyes like a little kid watching a horror movie, like what happens next? Or a scary movie. We wouldn't watch horror movies as little kids. But are you seeing more people turning to buying USA made? Are you seeing a trend? I'm hoping. I'm crossing my fingers.
So the answer is yes. I think during COVID we saw a decent uptick, right? Because there were people that it was front and center where they said, I need to buy American, I need to support that, and supply chains were down quite a bit. So I think we saw a nice push during that time of people finding options, people being interested in those options. Here we are, a few years later, and I think economic times are challenging for people, and they are going back to being a little bit more cost conscious. And as you referenced, for some people, they say, well, I'm going to go buy a t-shirt cheaper because I can get it at Walmart. Others are saying, I'm going to spend on something that I know is going to last because I want something that's going to be around for a while. So I think it goes both ways in that direction. I think what we've come to learn, though, with no matter what it is, it's blue jeans, it's flannels, it's teddy bears. There's a small group of people that are going to buy our product because it's American made, and that's the most important to them. But most other people are going to buy our flannel shirts because they're the world's best flannel shirts. And then being American made is a nice selling point with that. But, we still need to provide a great quality product, something that fits well, something that's really appealing for people. We're not going to be, the fast fashion where we're never going to have as many patterns or as many options as others out there. But we still need to be in the flannel industry, someone who has really desirable products for people. And then we're a great entry point where someone says, you know what, I like it. It's American made. It fits great. And as you said, it's super soft. So it has to be one of those top 3 or 4 selling points that it's made here in America to really justify, the sales price and introduce people to that. But, I think if we focus on just those people that are interested in buying American made, we're not going to be in business for very long. We have to create really great products. And that has quality, that has fit, that has design, all those different aspects to it. We have to have people that want to come back to our product because it's a good product. And oh yeah, we make it in the US too. So are people buying in larger troves because it's American made? I'd say today, probably not. It's probably been down for the last couple of years just due to the larger economic pressures. But I do think that has driven companies like ours to keep doing better, which I think is really important, right? I mean, that pressure from the consumer is really important to help keep us innovating and bringing new things to market for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good thought. That's a good way of looking at it. I would love to hear the answer that yes, more and more people are coming in just looking for the USA made products. And I want to say this for our international people who are listening, because I know we do have a good, subset of people who are international, that today we're talking about USA made products because we're here in the United States. What we're really promoting is people supporting their local economy and their local products. If you live in a different country, then by all means, please be trying to find your local producers, first of all. If you can't find that, at least be looking for clothing coming from a company from outside of your country that is taking really good care of its workers and creating really high quality stuff that you don't have to discard after one season because it's now stretched out or doesn't fit anymore or loses its shape, or it's so threadbare to begin with because it just didn't have the thread count that it just has holes and is falling apart. So not trying to be entirely USA centric, aside from the fact that we're in the United States. So that's what we're talking about in the frame of reference that we have. But it kind of goes across the board of just supporting your local economy is beneficial for everybody. It's good all the way around the board. So wherever you are. But that said, how can the US apparel industry remain competitive in the global marketplace and not just get to this place where we're already kind of noted to being one of the wealthiest nations, and now we're creating clothing that's for the wealthier subset of the wealthy nation? How do we stay competitive?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a complex and challenging answer. So I think from my perspective, there's something that we missed out on in the past few decades where we lost a lot of that apparel production. What we also lost was the innovation that comes along with a period of 20, 30, 40 years. And where apparel production has changed that the US is really behind on is a lot of places in China and other places that do a lot of apparel manufacturing, they've started co-locating a lot of their different processes. So you were talking about wool that's produced locally or something. If you want to be able to utilize that wool, what you're talking about is harvesting that wool, sending it off to someone who makes thread, and then it's sent off to someone who dyes that thread, and then it's sent off to someone who can weave that thread, right? It's this separate process where even though it's all domestic, it is going from oftentimes state to state to different suppliers who have the capabilities in those areas. So to get something from grown here in the US to actually a usable garment probably still has 4, 5, 6, 7 stops along the way. I think what you're seeing in places that have really taken to apparel manufacturing is they've started co-locating a lot of those. And it may not be the same company, but they may be next door to one another. Where if I called someone in China today, I have a single location that I could call in China, and my single contact there could make me socks. They could make me t-shirts. They could make me a jacket. They could do all those things within a period of 4 buildings that are all co-located to one another. That's partially because they have cheap labor and all those things, but it's also really partially because they built that infrastructure for that. So I think here in the US, we would refer to that as vertical integration or something like that, where you're taking that every step of the way and able to produce it from thread all the way to your final shirt. we don't have many facilities that are capable of doing that at this point. So unfortunately, I think if we are going to be competitive, we need to have some investment in areas like that. That being said, there are some bright spots along the way. There's a company down in Georgia that's working to make a t-shirt, and it's basically a fully automated t-shirt where everything from the size, the color, the fit, to the graphics that are put on it is done from a machine. So again, we're no longer relying on people to sit there at a sewing machine and push through high volumes of t-shirts. You're talking about hiring and educating machine operators that are, higher wage jobs and things like that. So there are a handful of companies that are moving in that direction, capable of doing that. But I think just, our industry as a whole needs to do a better job of, co-locating some of those facilities in order to produce in a little more of a seamless manner than what we typically do today.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I was just learning a little bit about this. I was visiting with a small local company who has just started raising all of their own mohair, their Angora goats, and they're actually turning it into socks. They're another one of the companies that we work with. It's Caprine Socks. And she was explaining to me how, in the home market, because I will take my wool and I will actually send it off to a mill here. But it's really for home use. It's really a hobby use. It's not a commercial use. And when I do that, I can send this as it came off the animal, I can send it to them and they're going to wash it, pick it, card it, spin it, put it on into skeins for me. They're going to do the whole thing for me and send it back all packaged. And she was letting me know, hey, when you move into the commercial world, that doesn't happen anymore. Every single one of those places is a different factory and it gets sent from one to the next to the next. And how much cost that incurs. So while she starts with her fiber here and her goats right here, it has to go, I think it was to New England, then to the South, and then back to New England. It was getting shipped all over the place just to end up with these socks back at her place here, our little county in North Idaho. And for her to then to be able to ship them out and to sell them. And so, yeah, I can see how there's a lot of opportunities to bring some of those pieces back into house or back into sister companies, at least working together, where it could make a lot less movement between one factory and the next and really help to bring that price down. So this is a really fascinating thought about the opportunities there. Hey, those of you guys, I know there's a lot of you guys listening who have children who are thinking about what they're going to do in their future, and maybe they're thinking about business. Here's an opportunity for you because it's definitely a need, something that we need to pick up some of this manufacturing that makes sense in the United States again. Okay, so moving forward, how do you think the Made in the USA movement can be strengthened and can, pick up a little more steam? For us, we're just talking about it and we're choosing to kind of vote with our dollars ourselves and continue to switch over as we find good brands. We switch over more and more. But what are other ways you think that the whole movement can be strengthened?
Yeah, well, one, that's another challenging question, right? I mean, I'm not sure I have a great answer for that. But I think, a lot of that is on shoulders of people like me. And I appreciate you helping out in this regard. I do think a large piece of it goes back to educating consumers. One, I think consumers are just buying too much, specifically in apparel here in the US. And that's just a cultural shift that we need to change. So I know your family is very thoughtful about your purchases and things. So I think that's really great to train this next generation on just not wanting as much, not needing as much. It scares me when I take my kids to an event and it's like, well, we got your free t-shirt. I'm like, how many free t-shirts do you need? Right? Like what are we teaching our children that they have to have a free t-shirt every time they go to an event to, something like that? That's not necessarily helping from a consumerism standpoint. I do think people really care about it, but they oftentimes don't stop to think about it. So when you are at Walmart and you see an item that's $4 for a shirt, you're not going to buy that if you sit there and say, wait, how did you get this for $4? It's a shirt. Like anyone who sat down at a sewing machine, no one's going to raise their hand and say, I do that for $4 every day, right? Like there's no one who's signing up for that job. So I think it is really going back to that, educating the consumer a lot more and getting away from this, one, fast fashion mentality, and two, this I can press a button and I have it the next day, right? I mean, I think Amazon and other, e-commerce platforms have really driven this. Like, I need to have it. I'm going to buy it right now. And if we just slow down a little bit and recognize that that's not necessarily the case, and we train our future generations on that, I think that's where we're going to have the most success. So I don't think it's going to be overnight. I do think there's a huge education component. And then for those people that are already buying American made, I'd like to give them a little bit of responsibility to say, go tell your friends, right? I mean, tell people about good companies that you find out there. There's something that I found with the brands that we now own and operate. I wasn't necessarily familiar with all of them before I started going down this path as well. And they're pretty easy to find if you look for them. If you take the time to go and look, and then you say, you know what, that's not a whole lot more expensive than buying what I would typically buy anyway. We just need to slow down and not buy just what's right in front of you. Just think about what it is that you need to think about. Be thoughtful about your purchasing habits. So, but again, to me, it largely goes back to education and showing people that there's opportunity to buy American made, and it's not too difficult to do so. And then, as you just encourage some of the listeners, find some people who are interested in innovating in the space. I'm not an expert in apparel by any means. I'm a little better on the marketing side, on the technology side, on the business side. And I just saw an opportunity to do this. I know there are people out there that are better on the apparel space than I am, and I'd love to have them on my team or in the industry, because I love going to a new factory and seeing something that's new, right? And saying, wow, you know what? We're doing so much better because this person is doing something new and innovative and driving that. The industry is really ripe for that type of innovation, and we need people that are raising their hand and saying, I want to be a part of it. I want to think about something in a very different way.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. So before we wrap up, tell us about the different companies wrapped up in the USA brands and how people can find them. I know we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but what are they? What does each one produce, and how can people find them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll start with flannel, since you and I are both wearing our flannel shirts today. So the flannel shirts we have on are from the Vermont Flannel Company. It's been around for more than 30 years, and we produce the world's coziest flannel. So we produce flannel, just about everything. You can get flannel button-down shirts like we're wearing today. We have flannel hoodies, our world famous lounge pants. We have bathrobes, just about anything that you want in flannel, we have it for you. So those can be purchased at vermontflannel.com. We also have a number of brick and mortar retail locations that are up in Vermont and Maine. Our other brands are All American Clothing. And as you had referenced, your husband wears the jeans. It's a great quality workwear jean. And our price point starts at about $65 for those jeans. So in addition to blue jeans, we sell t-shirts, we sell socks from a few other brands. We just sell basics, right? The nuts and bolts of what you need to wear every day. A lot of plain patterns, right? If you want a pair of jeans with a black t-shirt and you wear that for your work uniform, we've got you covered for that. And those are all quality products that are going to last a long time. That's at allamericanclothing.com. That is only sold online at this time. We have another denim blue jean brand that is called Gusset, or Gusset brand, and that's just at gusset.com, gusset.com. Those are jeans that are really made, similar to the workwear jeans. These have a little bit more of a good feel for someone who's riding just about anything. People that need a little bit of extra space and support for riding a horse, riding a motorcycle, different things like that. They have some really great features, and they are a really comfortable fit. And then our last brand that we mentioned is the Vermont Teddy Bear Company. So it's at vermontteddybear.com. We also have our factory that's open for tours in Shelburne, Vermont. So you can come visit us there. You can purchase a bear there in our retail store, or even build your own bear there if you would like to. That brand's been around for more than 40 years. So it's a great giftable brand if you're looking for a gift for a newborn, or great for birthdays, Christmas presents, things like that. We do make teddy bears, and those are our most popular products there. Anything from about 15 inches up to about 6 foot tall, and we also make a variety of other plush items now too. So you can get a unicorn, a dinosaur, a variety of different things if you're not really interested in a teddy bear. So those are the current brands that we have under the USA Brands portfolio at this time.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time, Joe, to come and talk with us about this, and just really, exploring this topic as really eye-opening, and trying to become more aware. Trying, as you were talking about, the kind of fast fashion part, boy, that's a little convicting even for me. And I try to be very conscientious about my purchasing. And I think, oh yeah, I have those moments where I just want to I want to get the thing today and get it sent to me tomorrow. And, and then probably the day after that, I'm going to look at it and go, do I really even like this thing? And, so it's just good for all of us to remember to be really conscientious, really looking at what we're doing, and to remember to vote with our dollars. And you guys, we will see you real soon. Thanks for hanging out. Goodbye.